Look at this photograph. A farming family standing in front of their house in Nebraska, May 1911. Father William Hutchinson, age 38, tall with a handlebar mustache, wearing his good work shirt. Mother Sarah, 34, holding their infant daughter Margaret wrapped in a white blanket. Son Jacob, 8, standing to the left looking serious. Daughter Emma, 11, on the right in a plain dress. Behind them, a modest two-story farmhouse with a wide porch, the kind that dot the Midwest plains, promising stability, rootedness, the American dream of land ownership. The photograph was taken by a traveling photographer named Henry Walsh on May 14, 1911. Walsh traveled through rural Nebraska, taking family portraits for $2 each. Most farming families couldn't afford such luxuries, but William Hutchinson insisted. "We need a family record," he told Sarah. "Something permanent." Walsh set up his camera, positioned the family just so, told them to hold still. The exposure took nearly 10 seconds. Nobody smiled. Smiling wasn't customary in photographs then, and besides, 10 seconds is a long time to hold an expression. So they look serious, almost stern. William's hand rests on Jacob's shoulder. Sarah cradles Margaret. Emma stands straight, hands at her sides. Walsh developed the photograph in his portable darkroom, delivered it to the Hutchinson farm 3 days later on May 17th. William paid him $2 in coins, half a week's profit from selling eggs and butter. Walsh remembered this because William counted the coins carefully, as if parting with money pained him. "Hard times," William said, "but family's worth it." Walsh left. That was the last time anyone saw the Hutchinson family alive. Or rather, the last time anyone saw them at all. May 30th, 1911. Tuesday morning. Carl Brennan, the Hutchinsons' nearest neighbor living 2 miles east, walked across the fields to the Hutchinson farm, carrying a borrowed post-hole digger he was returning. The morning was clear, temperature already climbing toward what would be a hot day. Brennan noticed the Hutchinson cattle were bellowing, loud, insistent, the sound cows make when they're overdue for milking. He approached the house. The front door was closed. He knocked. No answer. Knocked again. Nothing. "William? Sarah?" He tried the door. Unlocked. Pushed it open. "Hello? Anyone home?" The house was silent. Brennan stepped inside. The front room looked normal. Furniture in place. Nothing disturbed. He walked to the kitchen and stopped. Breakfast was on the table. 4 plates. Adults' portions on 2. Smaller portions on the children's plates. Eggs, now cold and congealed. Bread, slightly stale. 3 cups of coffee. 1 cup of milk. Forks and knives laid out beside each plate. But no one had eaten. The food was untouched. Brennan felt the coffee pot on the stove. Cold, but not ancient. The eggs weren't rotting. The bread wasn't moldy. This breakfast had been prepared recently, maybe yesterday morning, maybe the day before, not longer than that. He checked upstairs. 3 bedrooms, all beds made neatly, clothes in the wardrobes, William's work pants and shirts, Sarah's dresses, the children's clothes, a hairbrush on Sarah's dresser with strands of dark hair caught in the bristles, Jacob's wooden toy horse on his bedroom floor. Brennan went back downstairs, checked the back of the house. In the kitchen, he opened the cupboards. Flour, sugar, coffee, canned goods, all present. The pantry was well stocked. In the back bedroom, he found a drawer in the dresser slightly open. Inside, $47 in bills and coins, a significant sum for a farming family, not touched. He went outside to the barn. The cattle were in distress, udders swollen. They hadn't been milked in at least a day, maybe longer. In the chicken coop, the hens were agitated, unfed, but there were no dead animals, just hungry, neglected ones. The farm wagon was in the barn. Both horses were in their stalls. All the farm equipment was present. Plows, harrows, tools hanging on the walls. Nothing appeared to be missing. Brennan stood in the barn, trying to make sense of it. A family doesn't just leave their breakfast on the table, their money in the drawer, their livestock unfed. They don't leave without taking clothes, without taking their horses and wagon, without taking their savings. Unless something happened to them. Unless someone took them. Unless they ran. But from what? And to where? And why leave everything behind? Brennan walked back to his own farm and rode his horse into town. Found Sheriff Thomas Graham at his office in Fairfield, the county seat. "Tom, something's wrong at the Hutchinson place. Family's gone, food on the table, money still in the house, cattle not milked. It's like they vanished." Sheriff Graham assembled a search party. 6 men rode to the Hutchinson farm that afternoon. They conducted a thorough search. House, barn, outbuildings, fields, the creek that ran through the property, looking for bodies, for signs of struggle, for any indication of what had happened. They found nothing, no blood, no disturbed earth suggesting graves, no signs of forced entry or violence, no note explaining departure, just an empty house with breakfast on the table and a life interrupted mid-sentence. Sheriff Graham interviewed the neighbors. No one had seen the Hutchinsons leave. No one had heard anything unusual. No screams, no gunshots, no sounds of struggle. The last confirmed sighting was May 28th, Sunday, when William and Sarah had attended church in Fairfield with the children. They'd seemed normal, quiet perhaps, but not distressed. After church, they'd driven their wagon home. That was the last time anyone remembered seeing them. The sheriff checked with the railroad station. No one matching the Hutchinsons' description had purchased tickets. He telegraphed sheriffs in neighboring counties. No sightings. He contacted Sarah's family in Iowa and William's brother in Kansas. Neither had heard from them. The Hutchinson bank account remained untouched. William had $83 in savings, a year's worth of careful accumulation. He never withdrew it. Days passed, then weeks. The mystery deepened. Newspapers picked up the story. Farming family vanishes without trace. Nebraska mystery. Where are the Hutchinsons? Theories proliferated. Murder. Someone killed the entire family and disposed of the bodies so thoroughly no trace remained. But who? And why? William had no known enemies. He owed money, most farmers did, but not enough to kill over. And how does someone murder 5 people, including 3 children, transport 5 bodies, and leave no evidence? Kidnapping. Someone abducted the family. But kidnappers demand ransom. No ransom note ever arrived. And why kidnap an entire family, including a 4-month-old infant? Voluntary departure. The family left deliberately. But why leave food on the table, money in the drawer, a fully stocked farm? Why take no belongings? How did they leave without being seen by any neighbor or train station clerk? Accident. The family died together in some accident, fell in a well, drowned in the creek, got lost in the prairie. But search parties found no bodies. And how does an entire family accidentally die simultaneously? Supernatural. The most popular local theory. The farm was cursed. The family was taken by spirits, abducted by forces beyond human understanding. This explanation satisfied those who needed answers where none existed. The case remained open through 1911, into 1912, and eventually grew cold. The Hutchinson farm stood empty. No relatives claimed it. Sarah's family in Iowa didn't want it. William's brother in Kansas couldn't afford to travel to Nebraska to deal with it. The bank eventually foreclosed for unpaid mortgage. The property was sold at auction in 1913 for $600 to cover debts. A new family moved in briefly, but left within 6 months. They reported strange feelings, unexplained sounds, a general sense of unease. The house's reputation grew. The place where the Hutchinsons vanished. The haunted farm. Children dared each other to approach it. Adults avoided it. Over the decades, the house deteriorated. Roof leaked. Windows broke. Walls sagged. The barn collapsed in a windstorm in 1947. The porch fell apart in the 1960s. By the 1990s, the house was a shell. Walls standing but interior gutted. Dangerous to enter. The Hutchinson family became local legend. Old-timers told the story to newcomers. Historians wrote about it in county histories. Amateur sleuths proposed theories, but no one ever found the answer, until January 2025. A development company purchased the Hutchinson property, now just 40 acres of the original 160-acre farm, the rest having been subdivided and sold over the years. They planned to demolish the ruins and build a small housing development. On January 14, 2025, a demolition crew arrived with excavators and bulldozers. James Morrison, the foreman, was walking through the house one last time before demolition, checking for any historical artifacts worth preserving. The Nebraska Historical Society had requested they save any documents, photographs, or items of historical interest. Morrison was in the basement, what remained of it, mostly collapsed stone foundation, when he noticed something odd. One section of the wall looked different. The stones were arranged in a pattern that didn't match the rest of the foundation. He shone his flashlight closer. There was a gap, a deliberate gap, a hidden space. He pulled at the stones. They came away easily. They'd been placed, not mortared. Behind them was a metal box, roughly the size of a shoebox, wrapped in oilcloth. Morrison pulled out the box, unwrapped it carefully. The metal was rusted but intact. He opened it. Inside, a leather-bound diary, a photograph, and a letter. Morrison looked at the photograph first. A farming family. Father with handlebar mustache. Mother holding an infant. 2 children. Standing in front of the house he was standing in now. He opened the diary. First page. Property of William Hutchinson. If found, please read. Morrison sat down on the basement stairs, turned on his flashlight, and started reading. What he read made him forget about demolition, made him call his boss, made him call the Nebraska Historical Society, made him call the sheriff. Because after 114 years, the Hutchinson family mystery finally had an answer, and it was stranger than anyone had imagined. James Morrison sat in the collapsed basement of the Hutchinson house, excavator engine idling outside, holding a diary written 114 years ago by a man who'd vanished into legend. He'd worked demolition for 20 years, torn down hospitals, schools, churches, farmhouses, found hidden things before, cash in walls, love letters under floorboards, Prohibition-era whiskey in crawl spaces, but never something like this. The first entry was dated March 1903. William Hutchinson's handwriting was neat, methodical, the script of someone who'd had minimal schooling but took pride in what education he had. March 14, 1903. Purchased 160 acres from Fairfield Land Company. Price, $800. Paid $100 down. Remaining $700 financed through crop lien agreement with Blackwood General Store. Terms, 8% annual interest on principal. Must purchase all supplies through Blackwoods. Must sell all crops through Blackwoods at prices he sets. Signed the papers today. Mr. Blackwood said these are standard terms. Everyone borrows this way. Sarah worried about the debt. I told her we'll pay it off in 5 years. 10 at most. We own land now. That's what matters. Morrison's hands tightened on the diary. He knew what crop lien meant. He'd grown up in rural Nebraska, heard the stories from his grandfather about farmers who'd lost everything to predatory lending. But seeing it documented like this, reading a man's optimism before the trap closed, felt different. He flipped ahead. The entries continued chronologically, documenting farm life. Planting wheat. Birth of Jacob in April 1903. First harvest that fall. Then November 12th, 1903. Sold wheat crop today. 400 bushels at $0.90 per bushel. 360. I was excited to finally pay down the debt. But when I went to Blackwood's store to settle accounts, his ledger showed seeds purchased in spring, $85. Tools and equipment, $47. Household goods through the year, $93. Interest on $700 loan at 8%, $56. Total owed to Blackwood, $281. Net from crop sale, $79. I questioned the prices. Seeds seemed high. I'd seen the same variety at a store in Lincoln for $45. When I mentioned this, Blackwood reminded me, my contract requires I purchase exclusively from him. No choice. I asked to apply the $79 toward principal. He said it goes toward next year's operating expenses. I'll need seeds, supplies, credit to keep farming. The $700 debt remains unchanged. I don't understand how we'll ever pay this down if profit can't reduce principal. But Blackwood explained these are normal farming economics. Takes time, he said. Be patient. Morrison felt sick reading it. The mathematics of servitude laid out so plainly. He kept reading. April 18th, 1905. Emma born this morning. Healthy girl, strong lungs. Sarah doing well. But I'm worried about money. We can't afford doctor's bills. I've been hiding small amounts from crop sales. 50 cents here, $1 there. Saving for emergencies. So far, I've hidden $23 under a floorboard in the barn. Blackwood can't know. If he knew I was withholding revenue, he'd foreclose immediately. November 1905. 2 years farming. Worked harder than ever this year. Cleared another 20 acres. Increased yield. Total crops sold, $680. Should be enough to pay down debt significantly. But after Blackwood's accounting, seeds, tools, household goods, interest on compounding debt, 290 A's in deductions. Net, $382. Good profit, I thought. Asked to apply it to principal. Blackwood showed me the contract. The debt isn't $700 anymore. It's $850. How? Interest compounds annually. $700 at 8%, $56 first year. I didn't pay it, so second year I owe 8% on $750. Plus I borrowed additional $150 for spring planting supplies. Plus late fees I didn't know existed. All legal. All in the contract I signed without reading carefully enough. I'm working harder than I've ever worked. Growing more crops, earning more money, and falling deeper into debt. Morrison stopped reading, rubbed his eyes. Through the basement doorway he could hear his crew shouting to each other, wondering why he'd stopped work. He ignored them. This was more important than demolition schedules. The entries grew darker. May 14th, 1907. Debt now $1,140. 4 years of farming. I understand now. We're not farmers. We're servants. Blackwood owns us. The land isn't ours. It's collateral he'll seize when the debt becomes unpayable, which it will. I did the mathematics. It's impossible. I tried to refinance through the bank in Lincoln. They laughed. Said Blackwood's lien is first position. No one else will touch it. I tried to sell crops to other buyers at better prices. Blackwood sent the sheriff. Contract violation would mean immediate foreclosure. We're trapped. Sarah cries at night. She tries to hide it, but I hear her. Emma asked me yesterday, "Papa, why are you always worried about money?" She's only 2 years old, too young to understand we're drowning. December 8th, 1908. Debt, $1,680. Met with James Peterson tonight, our neighbor to the south. He's been farming 20 years, owes $2,800. His debt grows every year despite profitable harvests. He said, "William, we're all debt slaves, legal, respectable, American, but slavery nonetheless." The crop lien system was designed to replace chattel slavery after the Civil War. Different chains, same cage. He's planning to abandon his farm next spring. Just walk away. Leave everything. Start over somewhere else under a false name. He asked if I'd consider the same. I don't know. How do we leave? Where do we go? With what money? And wouldn't that make us criminals? Debtors fleeing legal obligations? But James said, "The obligations aren't legal. They're legalized. There's a difference. Slavery was once legal too. Didn't make it right." Morrison turned the page carefully. The entries jumped ahead 2 years. March 1911. I've been watching James Peterson's abandoned farm rot for 2 years. Blackwood foreclosed, sold it at auction for a fraction of its value to cover debt. James's 20 years of work, gone. His family's somewhere in Oregon now. I got one letter from him last year. He said, "Best decision I ever made. We're free now. Poor, but free. There's a difference." That word keeps echoing in my head. Free. Our debt is now $3,150. Blackwood came to the farm last week. Said I have 2 choices. Sell the farm to him for $500 to partially cover debt, or he'll foreclose through the courts and I'll get nothing. Either way, we lose everything. He gave me until June to decide. But I've already decided. We're leaving. Not running from debt. Running from a system that makes debt impossible to escape. Morrison's pulse quickened. Here it was. The decision. March 28th, 1911. Told Sarah my plan tonight. She cried. Not from fear, from relief. She thought I'd never have the courage. But watching our children grow up in poverty, knowing they'll inherit nothing but debt and hopelessness, I can't accept that. The plan. I've been hiding money for 6 years. $200 total. Enough for train tickets and first month's expenses somewhere new. Sarah's sister in Oregon says there's land available, no crop lien system, fresh start possible. We'll need new names, new identities. We'll become different people. Sarah said, I don't care what we're called, as long as we're together and free. Emma and Jacob don't understand yet. Emma's 11 now, old enough to know something's wrong. Jacob's 8, still thinks this is an adventure. Margaret's just 4 months old, too young to remember any of this. Maybe that's a blessing. May 14th, 1911. Hired photographer today, Henry Walsh, traveling through the county. $2 for family portrait. Sarah questioned the expense, but I insisted. This photograph is proof we existed. Proof we were the Hutchinson family before we became whoever we'll become next. If we succeed, someday we might want to remember. If we fail, maybe someone will find this diary and photograph and understand what we tried to do. Walsh positioned us in front of the house. I looked at it while we waited for the exposure. This house we built with our hands. This land we've farmed for 8 years. This life we're about to abandon. It's not ours. It never was. It belongs to Blackwood. We're just temporary occupants until foreclosure. When Walsh took the photograph, I felt like we were documenting our own funeral. Morrison set the diary down for a moment. His hands were shaking. He'd thought the family disappeared mysteriously, died in some unexplained tragedy. But this was deliberate, planned, desperate, but calculated. He picked up the diary again, flipped to the final entries. May 28th, 1911. Sunday. Attended church this morning with Sarah and the children. Last time we'll see these people. Last time we'll be the Hutchinsons. Blackwood was there, sitting in the front pew like a respectable businessman. He nodded to me after the service. Don't forget, William. June deadline for selling the farm. I'll be generous. $500. More than you deserve. I smiled and said, I'll have your answer soon, Mr. Blackwood. He doesn't know that my answer is already written. We leave tomorrow night. May 29th, 1911, 6 a.m. Tomorrow is today. Tonight we disappear. I've prepared everything. Hidden the money, $200, in a pouch Sarah will carry. Selected clothes for each of us, enough to look respectable, not enough to look like we're fleeing. Written instructions for the route. Walk east to the county line, 12 miles. Catch the morning train to Omaha. Buy tickets there for Oregon under false names. Robert and Ellen Thompson. Children David, Grace, and Mary. This afternoon, I'll prepare breakfast for tomorrow morning. Leave it on the table so whoever discovers our absence thinks we left suddenly during breakfast, not during the night. Make it look like abduction or accident, not deliberate flight. Buy us time before anyone realizes we ran. Tonight at 10 p.m., after dark, after neighbors are asleep, we leave. Forever. I'm writing this entry in advance because I don't know if I'll have time or composure tomorrow morning. I'm terrified, excited, guilty, determined. To whoever finds this diary, we didn't vanish mysteriously. We ran, deliberately, desperately, because America's system of legal debt slavery gave us no other choice. If you're reading this, it means someone finally found the truth we hid. Tell our story. Tell everyone that thousands of families like us were enslaved by debt, not chains. And some of us chose freedom over legality. May God forgive us for the lies we're about to tell. May God bless us with the freedom we're about to steal. William Hutchinson, May 29th, 1911, 6 a.m. The Hutchinson family will die tonight at 10 p.m. The Thompson family will be born. Morrison closed the diary carefully, sat in silence in the collapsed basement. Above him, sunlight slanted through broken floorboards. Outside, his excavator was still running, ready to demolish this house. But demolishing felt wrong now. This house was evidence. This house was monument. He pulled out his phone, dialed his boss. We need to stop demolition. I found something. Historical significance. We need to call the State Historical Society, and the sheriff, and maybe a genealogist. What did you find? Morrison looked at the diary, the photograph of the family standing in front of this very house, the letter still unread in the metal box. Proof that a ghost story was actually an escape story, and that American history is more complicated than anyone remembers. He ended the call, opened the letter, the third item in the metal box. It was addressed, "To whoever finds this." Morrison started reading, and realized the story was even stranger than he'd thought. Morrison set the diary down carefully beside the photograph and picked up the letter. The paper was yellowed, brittle, folded twice. He opened it gently, afraid it might crumble. The handwriting was the same as the diary, William Hutchinson's careful script. The letter was dated May 29th, 1911, 7 p.m., written hours before the family disappeared. Morrison read, "To whoever finds this. If you're reading this, we succeeded, or we died trying. Either way, we're gone. My name is William Hutchinson. This was my farm. I bought it in 1903 with debt I could never repay. The system was designed that way, to trap farmers in perpetual servitude through something called the crop lien system. Legal slavery for the 20th century. We're leaving tonight, May 29th, 1911, at 10 p.m. Walking away from this house, this land, this name, this life. Becoming new people. Robert and Ellen Thompson. New names for a new life. Oregon bound if we survive the journey. I'm writing this because if we succeed, no one will ever know what happened to the Hutchinson family. They'll search. They'll theorize. They'll invent explanations. Murder, kidnapping, accident, supernatural disappearance. Let them. The mystery protects us. As long as no one knows we ran deliberately, no one will search for us in the right places or under the right names. But someday, maybe decades from now, maybe centuries, someone will demolish this house. Find this hidden box, read this letter and diary, and know the truth. We didn't vanish mysteriously. We escaped systematically. Here's what we did. 1. Saved $200 over 6 years by hiding small amounts from every crop sale. Blackwood never knew. That money buys our freedom. 2. Studied James Peterson's escape route. He left 2 years ago, made it to Oregon, started over successfully. His letters guided our planning. 3. Chose May 30th, departure deliberately, day after Blackwood's monthly collection visit. He won't return for 4 weeks. By the time he realizes we're gone, we'll be established under new names 1,500 miles away. 4. Prepared the house to look like sudden disappearance during breakfast, not planned midnight escape. Left food on table, money in drawer, everything suggesting we intended to return. Creates confusion, delays pursuit. 5. Walk east to county line, 12 miles, avoiding main roads. Board morning train to Omaha at unmanned station where no clerk will remember us. Buy tickets there for Oregon under Thompson names. I'm telling you this not to boast, but to explain, and to say this. We are not criminals. We are not debtors fleeing legal obligations. We are enslaved people choosing freedom over legal slavery. The cropland system is evil, not illegal. Evil. It uses law to accomplish what slavery once did through chains. It traps families in unpayable debt, extracts their labor, denies them autonomy, and calls it business. Thousands of farmers across America are trapped the same way. Most will die trapped. We're running. If you judge us, judge also the system that made running our only option. If you report us, well, we'll be long dead by the time you read this. Report away. We'll be beyond reach of any warrant or judgment. If you understand us, tell our story. Tell people that the Hutchinson family didn't disappear mysteriously in 1911. They escaped deliberately, and that the American dream sometimes requires leaving America's nightmare behind. 3 more things. First, to Sarah's family in Iowa, we're sorry we can't tell you we're alive, but your grief protects us. If you knew, you'd be questioned. Your honest denials keep us safe. Forgive us. Second, to our children reading this someday, Emma, Jacob, Margaret, if any of you survive to adulthood and find this letter, know that we did this for you, so you wouldn't inherit our debt and servitude, so you could live as free people, even if under false names. Your real name is Hutchinson. Never forget that. But your free name is Thompson. Live that. Third, to Blackwood, you won. You extracted 8 years of our labor, kept us enslaved to unpayable debt, would have taken everything we built. But we're taking one thing back, ourselves. You can have the land, you can have the house, you can have the crops and the tools and the animals, but you can't have us. We belong to ourselves now. May 29th, 1911, 7 p.m. We leave in 3 hours. The Hutchinson family ends tonight. The Thompson family begins. William Hutchinson, P.S. If you're from the government or law enforcement and think we're fugitives, good luck. By the time you read this, we'll have been dead for decades. Chase ghosts if you want. P.P.S. If you're a historian or researcher, study the Kropp-Leon system. Study debt peonage in American agriculture 1865-1940. Study how America replaced chattel slavery with economic slavery and called it progress. Then ask yourself, how many other families disappeared because running was the only freedom available? We're not unique. We're just the only ones who left evidence. Morrison finished reading and sat motionless. Around him, the ruined basement was silent except for water dripping somewhere, wind whistling through broken walls. He looked at the 3 items spread before him: diary, photograph, letter. A complete historical record of an escape, preserved for 114 years in a wall. He pulled out his phone, dialed Dr. Sarah Chen at the Nebraska State Historical Society. She answered on the second ring. Dr. Chen, this is James Morrison, demolition foreman with Rebuild Nebraska. I'm at the old Hutchinson farm site. I found something significant. The Hutchinson disappearance case? Her voice sharpened with interest. That's been cold for over a century. What did you find? A diary, a letter, a photograph, all hidden in the basement wall, written by William Hutchinson, dated May 1911, right before the family vanished. My God, what does it say? Morrison looked at the letter again, at William's careful handwriting, at the P.S. about chasing ghosts, at the P.P.S. asking researchers to study how many others had run. It says they didn't vanish, Morrison said quietly. They escaped, deliberately, from debt slavery, and they left instructions for exactly how they did it. Silence on the other end. Then, I'm 40 minutes away. Don't touch anything else. Don't tell anyone else. This changes everything. There's more, Morrison said. The letter implies other families did the same thing, that the Hutchinsons weren't unique, just the only ones who left evidence. What if the mysterious disappearances we think are tragedies were actually successful escapes? Then we've been misreading American agricultural history for a century, Dr. Chen said. I'm leaving now. Don't move. Morrison ended the call. He looked up through the broken floorboards at the sky, at the house William Hutchinson had built and abandoned. A house that had stood empty for 114 years, slowly collapsing, reputation as haunted, keeping most people away. The perfect hiding place for the truth. He thought about William's question. How many other families disappeared because running was the only freedom available? Morrison had grown up hearing stories about vanished farming families. The Olsons in 1909 left breakfast on the table, never seen again. The McDonald family in 1913, wagon found abandoned, family gone. The Kowalskis in 1918, house empty, crops rotting in field. All mysteries, all unsolved. What if they weren't mysteries? What if they were escapes? Successful ones, because nobody looked in the right direction? Morrison stood up, climbed carefully out of the basement, walked outside into January sunshine. His excavator sat idle. His crew was eating lunch, waiting for him to resume demolition. But he wasn't going to demolish this house. Not anymore. This house was evidence, monument, memorial. Dr. Chen arrived 37 minutes later, driving a university van at speeds probably illegal on rural roads. She was mid-40s, Chinese-American, wearing a Nebraska State Historical Society jacket and carrying a leather satchel of archival tools. Morrison led her to the basement, showed her the metal box, the diary, the letter, the photograph. She knelt beside them, pulled out white cotton gloves, handled each item with reverence, read the letter twice, opened the diary, paged through entries, stopped on the final one dated May 29th, read William's last words as a Hutchinson, written hours before becoming Robert Thompson. "My God," she whispered, "this is the most significant historical find in Nebraska in decades, maybe ever. A first-hand account of planned escape from economic servitude. Dated, detailed, authenticated." "Can you verify it's real?" Morrison asked. "Handwriting analysis will take time, but initial assessment, paper's right age, inks consistent with 1911 manufacturing, diary binding matches period production. And the content," she gestured at the letter. "Nobody could fake this level of specific detail. References to crop lien system, debt progression, Blackwood's collection schedule, Peterson's Oregon escape, all checkable facts. So it's real. Preliminary assessment, yes, but more importantly, it's true." Dr. Chen looked up at Morrison. The Hutchinson family wasn't murdered, wasn't kidnapped, wasn't killed in some accident. They ran, successfully, and they're probably buried somewhere in Oregon under the name Thompson with descendants who have no idea they're actually Hutchinsons. Morrison felt a strange elation. The mystery that had haunted local history for 114 years wasn't a tragedy. It was a triumph. A family had chosen freedom over security, new identities over old debts, and apparently succeeded. "What happens now?" he asked. Dr. Chen stood, still holding the letter carefully. "Now we verify everything. Cross-reference the diary entries against county records. Check land sale documents. Track Blackwood's business records. Verify James Peterson's existence and Oregon relocation. Search Oregon records for Thompson family arrivals June 1911. Try to find descendants. And if you do, find descendants? Then we tell them their great-great-grandparents were heroes, that they escaped slavery everyone pretended wasn't slavery, that they had the courage to become new people rather than die as trapped ones." She looked at the photograph, at William and Sarah and the 3 children standing in front of the house that still stood overhead. "And we rewrite the story," she said. "The Hutchinson disappearance becomes the Hutchinson escape. The mystery becomes a liberation narrative. The ghost story becomes a freedom story." Morrison nodded. Then something occurred to him. The letter says other families might have done the same thing, that the Hutchinsons weren't unique. Should we look into other disappearances? Dr. Chen's eyes lit up. Yes. God, yes. Cross-reference every unexplained farming family disappearance in Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, the Dakotas between 1880 and 1930. Look for patterns, debt problems before disappearance, breakfast left on tables, locked houses, sudden vanishing. Map it, analyze it. You think there are more? I think the Hutchinsons left evidence because they wanted someone to eventually know the truth. But how many others ran and didn't leave evidence? How many successful escapes are still classified as mysteries or tragedies? How many murdered families actually made it to Oregon or California and died peacefully decades later under false names? Morrison felt the weight of it. Not just one story, potentially dozens, hundreds. A hidden history of resistance to economic slavery, disguised as mysterious disappearances because that's how successful escape works. You vanish so completely, no one knows you ran. "There's one more thing," Dr. Chen said, picking up the photograph. This photograph, taken May 14th, 1911, 2 weeks before escape. William writes in the letter, it's proof they existed before becoming the Thompsons. But look at their faces. Morrison looked. William serious, determined. Sarah holding Margaret tight. Emma and Jacob standing close. "They know," Dr. Chen said quietly. "Look at their expressions. This isn't a normal family portrait. This is a farewell photograph. They're saying goodbye to being the Hutchinsons. And the photographer, Henry Walsh, he had no idea he was documenting the last days of a family about to voluntarily cease to exist. She turned the photograph over. On the back, in faded pencil, someone had written, Hutchinson family, May 14th, 1911. God bless their journey. Morrison and Dr. Chen looked at each other. William wrote that, Dr. Chen said, after Walsh left. A prayer, a hope, a epitaph for the Hutchinson name. She carefully placed the photograph, diary, and letter back in the metal box. This goes to the university immediately. Climate-controlled archiving, digitization, analysis, publication. The Hutchinson story needs to be told. What about the house? Morrison asked. Dr. Chen looked up at the ruined structure overhead. The house stays. This site becomes a historical landmark. The basement where the evidence was hidden becomes part of the exhibit. People need to see where the truth was buried for 114 years. Morrison thought about his demolition contract, about the development company's plans, about his job. Then he thought about William Hutchinson hiding that metal box in the wall, hoping someday someone would find it and understand. I'll call my boss, Morrison said. Tell him demolition's canceled. This isn't rubble. It's a monument. Dr. Chen smiled. To the Hutchinson family, who disappeared from history and walked into freedom, and left a trail of evidence for anyone brave enough to look. They climbed out of the basement together, carrying the metal box between them, treating it like the treasure it was, proof that sometimes the greatest mysteries are actually the greatest triumphs, and that America's history of resistance to oppression includes not just those who fought, but those who ran, not just those who revolted publicly, but those who escaped quietly, not just heroes who stayed and died, but survivors who left and lived. The Hutchinson family was free, had been free for 114 years. It just took that long for anyone to notice. 6 months after James Morrison found the metal box in the Hutchinson basement, Dr. Sarah Chen stood in a cemetery in Bend, Oregon, looking at 2 gravestones she'd searched half a year to find. Robert Thompson, 1872 and 1947, beloved husband and father. Ellen Thompson, 1877-1951, devoted wife and mother. The dates were right. Robert Thompson would have been 38 in 1911, William Hutchinson's exact age. Ellen Thompson would have been 34, Sarah Hutchinson's age. They'd arrived in Oregon in June 1911 and purchased 80 acres of farmland in Deschutes County under the Thompson name. Paid cash. No mortgage. No debt. Dr. Chen knelt, placed her hand on the gravestone. I found you, she whispered. After 114 years, I found you. Behind her, Morrison cleared his throat. The descendants? 40 minutes away. Margaret's great-granddaughter. Lives in Bend. Agreed to meet us. Dr. Chen stood, brushed dirt from her knees. She has no idea her great-great-grandmother was born Margaret Hutchinson. She only knows her as Margaret Thompson, who died in 1989 at age 78. Margaret lived to 78? Morrison felt unexpected emotion. The baby in the photograph. She survived. They all did, Dr. Chen said quietly. Emma, Grace Thompson in Oregon, died 1967 at 56. Jacob, David Thompson, died 1952 at 49. All 3 children lived full lives, had families, careers, grandchildren who never knew their real names. They walked through the cemetery to the parking lot. The Oregon spring was cold, mountain wind cutting through trees. Morrison thought about William and Sarah making this same journey in 1911, walking 12 miles overnight, riding trains under false names, arriving in Oregon with $200 and 3 children and nothing else. The DNA test confirmed it? Morrison asked. Dr. Chen nodded. 99.97% match. Margaret's great-granddaughter, Linda Castellano, shares DNA with Sarah Hutchinson's sister's descendants in Iowa. Undeniable genetic link. The Thompsons are the Hutchinsons. They drove to Linda Castellano's house in silence. Morrison kept thinking about William's letter. If you're from the government and think we're fugitives, good luck. By the time you read this, will have been dead for decades. William had been right. He died in 1947, 36 years after escaping. Sarah died 4 years later. Both lived long enough to see their children grow up free, unburdened by the debt that would have crushed the Hutchinson family. Linda Castellano's house was small, well kept, with a garden full of spring flowers. She answered the door before they knocked. Mid-60s, short gray hair, nervous energy. "Dr. Chen? Mr. Morrison?" She gestured them inside. "I still don't understand what this is about. You said it's about my great-great-grandmother Margaret?" They sat in her living room. "Doctor." Chen pulled out a folder containing the photograph, copies of the diary entries, and the DNA test results. "Ms. Castellano," Dr. Chen began carefully, "what did your grandmother tell you about the Thompson family history?" "Not much. Grandma Margaret, my great-grandmother, died when I was 12. I remember her saying the Thompsons came to Oregon in 1911 from Nebraska, started a farm, worked hard. She was proud of being fourth-generation Oregonian." Linda frowned. "Why?" Dr. Chen opened the folder, placed the photograph on the coffee table. "Is this your great-great-grandmother?" Linda leaned forward, studied the photograph, the woman holding the baby. That looks like great-great-grandma Ellen. I've seen photos of her from when she was older. Same face. But this photo looks older than 1911. The clothing, the quality." "It was taken May 14th, 1911, Dr. Chen said, 2 weeks before your great-great-grandparents left Nebraska." "But," Linda looked confused, "this says Hutchinson family on the back, not Thompson." Dr. Chen took a breath. "Because your great-great-grandparents weren't born Thompsons. They were born Hutchinsons, William and Sarah Hutchinson. Your great-great-grandmother Margaret was born Margaret Hutchinson. Her siblings were Emma and Jacob Hutchinson. They changed their names in 1911 when they escaped from debt slavery." Linda stared at her. "What?" Morrison leaned forward. "Your great-great-grandfather was trapped in something called a crop lien system. Legal economic slavery. He owed money he could never repay. The debt was designed to be unpayable. So he planned an escape, changed his family's names, started over in Oregon as the Thompsons." Dr. Chen slid the diary across the table. "He left this hidden in the wall of his Nebraska farmhouse. It documents everything: the debt trap, the decision to run, the escape plan. He wanted someone to eventually know the truth." Linda opened the diary, read the first entry dated March 1903. Read entries about debt accumulation, about $200 hidden over 6 years, about the plan to become the Thompsons. Her hands were shaking. "My great-great-grandfather was a fugitive?" "He was a freedom seeker," Dr. Chen corrected gently. "Like escaped enslaved people before the Civil War, like refugees escaping oppression. He chose freedom over legal servitude, and he succeeded. Your family has been free for 114 years because he had that courage." Linda read silently for several minutes, then looked up, tears in her eyes. The family mystery. Grandma Margaret used to say there was something her parents never told her, some secret from before Oregon. She'd ask her mother Ellen about Nebraska, and Grandma Ellen would change the subject. Say, "We're Oregonians now. The past doesn't matter." "The past mattered," Morrison said, "but talking about it would have been dangerous. If anyone knew they were the Hutchinsons, they could have been prosecuted for debt evasion. So they stayed silent, protected their children by never telling them the truth." Linda wiped her eyes, looked at the photograph again, at baby Margaret in Ellen's arms. "This baby is my great-grandmother, and she never knew her real name." "She knew the only name that mattered," Dr. Chen said. "Thompson, the name of a free family. Your great-great-grandfather gave his children freedom by giving them a new identity. That was his gift." "Can I?" Linda touched the photograph carefully. "Can I keep a copy?" "You can keep the original," Dr. Chen said. "It belongs to your family. The diary and letter will be archived at the Nebraska State Historical Society. But the photograph goes to you. It's proof of who your ancestors were before they became who they needed to be. Linda held the photograph like it might dissolve. The Hutchinson family. We're the Hutchinson family. You're both, Morrison said. Hutchinsons who survived by becoming Thompsons. That's not erasure. That's adaptation. That's survival. 3 months later, the Nebraska State Historical Society held a public exhibition titled The Hutchinson Escape: Hidden Histories of Economic Slavery in American Agriculture, 1865-1930. The centerpiece was William Hutchinson's diary, displayed in a climate-controlled case alongside the letter and a reproduction of the family photograph. The original photograph hung in Linda Castellano's living room in Oregon. But the exhibition wasn't just about the Hutchinsons. Dr. Chen's team had spent 6 months investigating other mysterious disappearances of farming families across Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, and the Dakotas between 1880 and 1930. They'd found 17 cases with patterns matching the Hutchinson escape. Families with significant debt to local merchants or landowners. Sudden disappearances with food left on tables, belongings untouched. No evidence of violence or foul play, no bodies ever found. New families with similar demographic profiles appearing in western states within months, 17 families. Approximately 80 people total, all likely escapes disguised as mysteries. The exhibition mapped them. The Olson family, 1909 Nebraska, reappeared as the Andersons in Washington state. The McDonald family, 1913 Iowa, became the Mackenzies in California. The Kowalski family, 1918 Kansas, transformed into the Kowalskis in Montana. All successful, all hidden for decades, all part of a resistance movement no one had documented because successful resistance looks like disappearance. Morrison attended the exhibition opening, watched crowds examine the diary entries, read William's letter, study the escape patterns. A high school history teacher brought her class, teenagers who'd never heard about crop lien systems or debt peonage. So these families were like Underground Railroad but for debt slaves? One student asked. Exactly, Dr. Chen said. She was giving tours personally, explaining each case. Economic slavery is still slavery. These families understood that. They chose freedom over legality. And they succeeded so completely we thought they'd died mysteriously. Linda Castellano attended with her 3 adult children and 7 grandchildren. 4 generations of Thompsons who now knew they were also Hutchinsons. They stood in front of the photograph reproduction, Linda explaining to her grandchildren, "That baby is your great-great-great-grandmother Margaret. She escaped slavery before she could walk." Morrison found himself standing next to an elderly man examining the Hutchinson diary through the glass case. The man was crying silently. "You okay?" Morrison asked. The man wiped his eyes. "My grandfather disappeared from his farm in South Dakota in 1921. Breakfast on the table, everything left behind. Family searched for years, thought he'd been murdered. But now," he gestured at the exhibition, "what if he wasn't murdered? What if he ran? What if he's one of the undocumented cases?" "What was his name?" Morrison asked. "Samuel Johansson. Owed money to a grain company. Couldn't pay. Then one morning, gone." Morrison wrote it down. "We're still researching. If you have any documentation, debt records, family stories, anything, bring it to Dr. Chen. We're trying to find all of them. Tell all their stories." The man nodded gratefully. "I always wondered why we couldn't find him. Maybe he didn't want to be found. Maybe that was the point." "That was exactly the point," Morrison said. 1 year after the discovery, the Hutchinson farmhouse was declared a Nebraska State Historical Landmark. The basement where Morrison found the metal box was preserved as an exhibition space. The house itself was stabilized, restored partially, turned into a museum. A bronze plaque was installed at the entrance. The Hutchinson House, 1903-1911. Home of William and Sarah Hutchinson, who escaped economic slavery on May 29, 1911, by transforming their family into Robert and Ellen Thompson of Oregon. They left this house empty but took their freedom with them, in memory of all families who disappeared not because they died, but because they chose to live free. The exhibition attracted historians, genealogists, descendants of other disappeared families, students studying agricultural economics, and people who'd never heard about debt peonage in American history. Some came skeptical. How could slavery exist in 20th century America? And left understanding that chains come in many forms: legal forms, economic forms, forms that look like contracts but function like bondage. Dr. Chen published her research in the American Historical Review, Escape as Disappearance: Hidden Histories of Economic Slavery and Resistance in American Agriculture, 1865-1930. It won 3 academic awards and was taught in universities nationwide. Morrison went back to demolition work but turned down the Hutchinson site contract, refused to tear down what he'd helped save. The development company found another project. The Hutchinson house stood. Linda Castellano started a foundation, the Thompson Hutchinson Freedom Fund, providing debt relief for farming families facing foreclosure. "My great-great-grandparents chose one kind of freedom in 1911, she told reporters at the launch. "We're choosing another kind now, helping families stay free without having to run." The fund helped 17 families in its first year, one for each documented escape case. Linda said it was no coincidence. 5 years after the discovery, on May 29, 2030, the 119th anniversary of the Hutchinson escape, Morrison and Dr. Chen stood in the Hutchinson house basement where it all began. The space was clean now, lit properly, with interpretive panels explaining the discovery. School groups toured weekly. Researchers came from across the country to study the documents, but on this anniversary morning, the house was empty except for the 2 of them. "I keep thinking about William's letter," Morrison said. "The PPS. He asked how many others disappeared because running was the only freedom available." "We've documented 23 now," Dr. Chen said. "Could be 50. Could be 100. Most left no evidence. The Hutchinsons left evidence because William wanted the truth known eventually. But most escapees stayed silent their entire lives, took the secret to their graves. Which means they succeeded completely. Which means we're still discovering resistance movements that hid so well we mistook them for tragedies." Morrison thought about that. About how many mysteries might actually be triumphs. How many disappeared people might be living descendants under different names. How many tragedies might actually be heroic escapes lost to history because success looks like vanishing. "The photograph is still the key," Dr. Chen said. "That moment on May 14, 1911, when William insisted on documenting his family before they stopped being the Hutchinsons. That's what made this discoverable 114 years later. Without that photograph, we'd still think they'd been murdered." "He knew someone would eventually find it," Morrison said. "He believed in future witnesses." He was right to believe. They stood in silence, looking at the wall where Morrison had found the hidden space. The stones had been replaced in their original pattern, but now a small glass window showed the cavity where the metal box had been hidden for 114 years. "Sometimes I wonder what William would think," Morrison said, "if he could see this, his house as a museum, his story taught in schools, his escape documented and celebrated." "I think he'd be satisfied," Dr. Chen said. "He wrote that letter for exactly this purpose. Tell our story. Tell people the Hutchinson family didn't disappear mysteriously. They escaped deliberately. We're doing what he asked. We're also doing what he didn't ask for, finding the others, documenting the pattern, rewriting how we understand agricultural history. That's the gift of one brave family," Dr. Chen said. "They left evidence. Others didn't. But their evidence opens the door to understanding everyone else's silence. Every unexplained disappearance now gets reconsidered. Was this murder